You can have no greater sign of confirmed pride than when you think you are humble enough. And I'm just going to have to believe that you're humble enough, and we're going to move on, and we'll just carry our humility through the rest of the rest of the session. We're going to talk about communicating openly and candidly, which is a real struggle for most organizations, most relationships, reporting relationships, friends, families, marriages. So the things we're going to talk about are universally true, and I should say applicable. And I invite you to spend some time thinking about what we talk about. But I'm going to assure you that it is safe. So we're going to talk about some, not sensitive topics, but you're probably going to be asked some questions you might not have been asked before, because in the spirit of being open and candid. We're going to take a look at a very quick video. It's very quick.
Hi. Welcome to the neighborhood. I brought you this pie to see if you're weird.
That smells intrusive.
It is.
Did you want to come in, maybe snoop around a bit?
That's why I'm here.
Wouldn't it be great if everyone said that?
So we're going to get you closer to talking about what's really on your mind. Maybe not like that neighbor, but it really comes with some very simple core practices. And really, it starts with awareness, and then it starts with trying it, okay? I used to teach a program called The Undiscussables, and is based on some research by Harvard psychiatrist Chris Argyris, who identified that every person has undiscussables. He followed what's going on inside people's mind, and he determined that we have the conversations we're actually holding and verbalizing, and then the ones we're keeping to ourselves, the ones we never speak. Do you have those? Do you have those? So because every person has them, then every organization has them, because organizations are made up of people. Undiscussables are those matters that we're not talking about. They're either taboo, they're off limits, we've been told we can't talk about them, they're sensitive. They aren't inappropriate. That's not the point at all. It's for some reason they've been marked as we're not going to talk about them. We're going to make some progress on that. A few years ago, I was coaching somebody, a leader, a senior leader, and he was very good at what he does, and he got a new boss. And for the first several months, they just weren't doing well together. I would listen to him talk about how things were, and it was every time we would meet, it would be about the struggles, how she just doesn't get it. I was coaching the man. He had a new boss who was a woman. And finally I just said, have you told her what you're thinking? Have you told her what you're experiencing? Have you told her what it's like to report to her? He said no. And what he said next was the most important thing. He said, if she asks, then I'll tell her. What does that translate? If she asks, then I'll tell her. What does that mean in reverse? Say it aloud.
If she doesn't ask, I'm not saying it.
If she doesn't ask, I won't say. I won't speak up. It was just profound. And I started thinking how true that is. I started paying attention to my own speaking up, and watching myself in meetings, watching myself in relationship with those I work with, those I work for, those I was involved with projects and in my life outside of work. And I really challenge you to pay attention. How many matters are there that are important that you're not bringing up? And why is that? And we'll explore it. We'll find some reason. I always say what most affects an organization's willingness to seek, speak, and hear the truth. What do you think it is? It's always the leader. It's always the leader. Now, I told you at the beginning, you're the most important person. You matter most. And this is one of the areas that you have the most impact, influence. You are the one who create the environment where people will or won't speak up. Culture, candor culture starts at the top. And again, if we're in hierarchical organizations, we have to be more aware of that. But it's also true in a marriage. It's also true in a friendship where there isn't hierarchy. It's also true among peers. And you're going to prove that to me in a few minutes. And I always tell leaders, when your employees don't speak up, it's not their problem. It's yours. Because you don't know. You're not kept informed of those things that are important. What do these dates mean to you? January 28, 1986. Shuttle. Instantly. Okay, say more. What happened? What happened? The shuttle. The shuttle blew up. Do some of you, I know we have different ages and some people haven't been, okay. We do remember. We do remember. February 1st, 2003. Same theme.
Columbia.
Columbia, thank you. Okay, so 86 was the Challenger, 2001 was Columbia. In both cases, the entire cruise perished. In both cases, researchers, experts, non-experts went into NASA as investigators and they looked into what happened. And we know what happened with Challenger. Anyone? The O-rings. The O-rings that were in place could not withstand the temperatures. Does anyone remember what happened with Columbia? Heat shields or foam tiles, those that were on the exterior. And that's the one we watched just disintegrate across the lower tier states of the U.S. In both cases, investigators confirmed that up to 24 individuals, teams, milestone checkpoints, and senior leaders knew and didn't speak up. They knew and didn't speak up. And I know you're thinking, well, Tom, we run schools. We run, I run a church or a parish office, or I'm a pastor. We're not talking about life and death. But what I will say is good, decent, professional, educated, committed people don't speak up unless invited, unless asked, unless it's made safe. Trust me on this. The data, the research, the stories go on and on. Penn State football. Good, decent, educated, esteemed, highly regarded people did not speak up. Wells Fargo Bank. What am I referring to when I say Wells Fargo? And if you have worked there or have family members or spouses, or what am I referring to? The number. I heard credit cards, the mortgages. What else? The sales tactics of actually allowing, training, and authorizing employees to open accounts, close accounts, move money. Yeah. Enron, WorldCom, the list just goes on and on. But it happens in small organizations. It happens in teams. And if I could impress upon you one thing, that really good, decent, devoted, committed, educated, professional people will not speak up unless asked. We're going to give you skills. I'm not just going to leave you hanging. We're going to give you some techniques, some approaches. So your undiscussable story. Work with me. You have one. You're going on vacation. You've been working hard. You plan a wonderful vacation. This time, it's a driving vacation. You choose your destination, you're excited. You have it all planned. You get your car checked out and you're ready to go. The day of your vacation arrives. You gather everything, you pack, you load, you drive, and you're on your way. You're halfway between home and your destination. And you decide to pull over and you get out and stretch. You're at a convenience store. You go in, you get your snack, you get your soft drink. You're walking back to your car and you hear a voice you've never heard before, a perfect stranger. And somebody says, "Excuse me, is that your car?" And you turn around and look at a perfect stranger and you say, "Yes." And they say, "I thought you'd want to know it's leaking." Would you want to know? Yes. Would you want to know? Yes. Really? It's really unfortunate news. It's really a surprise. it's not a particularly good time, maybe pretty expensive, would you want to know? Yes, you absolutely would want to know. If your car was leaking, so that's a material item. If your organization was leaking, would you want to know? Yes, it has to be yes. There can't be any other answer. Whether it's your parish or your office staff or your school, the answer has to be yes. And if you just said yes, you just took the hook. And you're in for the rest of the day because we're going to talk about how to do this. If your marriage was leaking, would you want to know? If the data, the financial data in your parish was one thing, but it was being reported as another, would you want to know? If talented people were planning on leaving, would you want to know? The answer is always yes. But as a society and as organizations and as leaders, we don't behave that way. We keep things to ourselves. And it's because, work with me here, really good, decent, reasonable, educated, committed, professional people will not speak up unless they're asked. It is at the crux of all relationships, of all communication. It is the oxygen of relationship, is being able to speak up. Silence is expensive. It comes in all forms. And really, in a group like this, it would be no different than a business. Poor job performance, struggling leaders. Do you have struggling leaders, by the way? Yes. Unsolicited, brilliant ideas, great ideas that don't get offered up. Missed work results. Did the work results ever get missed in your areas, the organizations you lead? Yeah. Teams not working together, problems and mistakes not being reported, talented people planning to leave, happens everywhere. You as leaders can make a difference. You make the most difference. I'm going to ask you to turn to one person sitting next to you and just ask, I'm going to give you you have a timer. I don't know if you've noticed, you have a little yellow timer. If you turn it upside down, it gives you 3 minutes. What are the payoffs to talking openly in your organization, in your team, on your parish staff, on your faculty? What are the payoffs to talking openly? Don't tell me how you can't, just tell me what would be the payoffs if you could in the areas you lead.
Trust.
Trust. And I'm repeating them for the recording. Thank you. What else? What are some other payoffs? Better buy-in by participants. A sense of acknowledgement that what people say, they're acknowledged in their group.
Right.
Yes.
For their contributions.
For their contributions. What else? What are some other payoffs, benefits, advantages of speaking up, talking openly? Validation. You can't fix what you don't know. And I appreciate what you say. I can't validate. I can't validate what I don't hear. What else? Well, just one or two more. What are some? Mary Jo.
You can address issues when they're small.
Oh, so much smaller. Bishop and Eileen mentioned I do mediation. I do conflict resolution, and I also do, a component of that is peacemaking and reconciling. And we're going to talk about that this afternoon. I'm going to give you some tools and some practices. You'd be amazed how so many things can be addressed earlier before they escalate, before they get drawn out, before more people are hurt. Talking about things behind people's back, also known as gossip. I actually was hired by a company a couple of years ago to come in because the senior leadership team, the executives, were struggling with gossip. So I'd never been asked to do that. I mean, there's gossip at every level, but management doesn't usually hire me to come in and fix them about gossip. And all we could do is we talked about the damage of gossip and the ways gossip evolves and how the impact it has. And finally, by the end, I said, okay, you're gonna remove gossip. That's great. Now, what are you going to fill your conversations with if you're going to remove gossip? And they were stumped. They said that we don't know what we're going to talk about. We'll talk more about that this afternoon when we talk about building trust, building credibility. But if we're removing that, I know what we're going to fill it. We're going to fill it with the truth. We're We're going to fill it with feedback and input, questions, concerns. Yeah. Some payoffs that I just put on here, and I don't know if everybody can read in the back of the room. We get more reliable information. Problems resolved in less time, lower cost, and fewer problems reoccur. Leaders feel more in control, and that always feeds what leaders want. They want control, but less stress and less overwhelmed. Employees are more focused on what they want. And actually, is it Denise? Did you say mission before?
Yeah, we were talking about it.
Yeah, it allows us to focus on mission. Yeah. People take greater interest in and responsibility for resolving matters earlier. Leaders gain access to what they need most: experience, knowledge, ideas, and information. No leader can come to work and only lead with what they know. They rely on data, they rely on being kept informed, they rely on wisdom, they rely on the expertise. I tell people, you hired them all as talent, and then you squelch them. You orient them into your meetings, and you orient them into your culture, and you no longer invite their ideas that you were excited about when you hired them. Yeah. So, I always say that everybody has undiscussables. Every organization has undiscussables. So we're going to do a little poll. I'm going to ask you, this, I don't know when this happened last, you actually get to take out your cell phone. Of course, most of you already have them out. So, I don't know if you've ever done online polling. It's very simple. The first we'll get it all set up, and then we'll roll. This question is, what is your favorite season of the year? And it's very simple. If you look on the screen, A, B, C, or D are your answers to your question. You can't be wrong. It's your favorite season of the year. You can change your answer too. The next question is, do you have important ideas, questions, or concerns you've not shared with your leader? Do you have important questions, concerns, or ideas that you've not shared with your leader? This is interesting. So about two-thirds of the room have important, are you tracking with me? Important ideas, questions, and concerns you've not shared with your leader. I'm not going to ask you why, I'm not going to ask you what, I'm not going to ask you who, and by the way, it's all anonymous. Okay, and this is pretty typical. Actually, business groups are a little higher. And I only work in a business environment, I only work with a leader and his or her directs. And the leader is aghast that you're kidding me. The people in this room have important ideas, questions, and concerns they've not shared with me, and I say yes. They're a very typical group. All right, we'll go on. I'll save all the data and I'll send it to Bishop. Okay. Do you have important ideas, questions, and concerns you've not shared with your peers? Those you work along with. What's your reaction to these last two questions? I can't go back and forth because then it closes the poll. But it was two-thirds and one-third for the last question. Roughly the same here. What's your reaction to this?
More comfortable talking to your peers than your leader.
Right? And I'm surprised somebody hasn't said, Tom, you bundled the question. You've got important ideas, important questions, important concerns. And that's true. But it was a way of getting you to think widely. It's part of the culture. Yeah. So I'll let you rest with this, and truly, all this data will be saved and it will be provided as a report. Eileen will get the report. You're a very typical group. We're going to just look at another question. It's worded slightly different. How likely is it you are consistently and fully being told by your peers what you need to know? Now, a moment ago you answered to the extent you share information. Now you're going to estimate how likely is it you are being kept informed of what you need to know. Let's just extend that, to do your job, there's a reason. How likely you are consistently and fully being told by your peers what you need to know. Well, so this says, help me with the math. 82% are somewhere between perhaps, not likely, and not sure. Now, how much do you rely on people keeping you informed? A great deal. And now, this is only your estimation. We don't know what it is actually. Would you like to find out? We'll help you with that. Let's look at another question. How likely is it you're consistently and fully being told, same STEM sentence, by your direct reports what you need to know? By those who you, the first one was your peers. Now it's those people who report to you, who have an accountability, whom you count on to keep you informed. Again, roughly 60-40 are somewhere, 40 is highly likely and 60 is between perhaps and not. It's an important data point to consider. And when I do it with teams, we try to come closer to why. Do you have personal or professional feedback that would be helpful for your peers to know you've not shared? Personal or professional feedback, awareness that would be helpful for your peers to know that you've not shared. So as a person in this room with a peer, and of course your peer doesn't have to be in this room, but if we all have peers, how does it make you feel that you're unsure whether they're telling you either useful personal or useful professional feedback that they're not sharing with you? Is that okay? Most people would want to know. If your car was leaking, you'd want to know. Okay. We're just going to do a couple more polls and then we'll give you some tools. This is the same question, STEM sentence, but now toward your leader. Do you have personal or professional feedback that would be helpful for your leader to know that you've not shared? That would be helpful for your leader to know that you've not shared. Most people are walking around with undiscussables. They aren't necessarily inappropriate, they aren't offensive, they aren't even strong, but there's something about them that they've not disclosed. Again, it can be comfort level. Oftentimes it's because the leader has not invited, welcomed, or honored it. This is basically 50-50. Half of the people in this room have useful information, professional or personal, they've not shared with someone who would benefit. Okay. We have to wonder why. I think this is our last one. This is about same STEM sentence about direct reports. This is a very admirable data point where we're comfortable sharing information, and I don't like to use this word, but it gets used in organizations, downward, to those who report to us. So we have a much stronger rate of believing we're keeping people informed around feedback they would need to know. This is great. Anyone else want to remark about this? Or why this might be? Or are we kidding ourselves that we're keeping others informed more than other people are keeping us informed? We don't know. Okay. Fears. Fear is the driving behavior behind all human behavior, behind the human condition. You could talk about it psychologically, you could talk about it emotionally, you could talk about it spiritually, you could talk about it relationally. Fear is the biggest driver. These are some that data shows us. Fears of looking stupid, being disloyal, losing an advantageous position, hurting feelings, change, being embarrassed, being disliked, looking uninformed, losing support, appearing to be attention-seeking. These are just some. But everybody tends to base or associate a reason they don't speak up better more candidly with a fear. I'm just going to invite you. This is a very safe poll. What fears get in the way of you talking openly? And you're not going to have to. It's all anonymous. Can you read those from there? Okay. Whatever the fear is, it's okay, because really good, decent, reasonable, educated, committed, professional people don't speak up. We're in good company. But sometimes it's helpful just to name it or recognize it or see our data among others. This is not surprising. We're in the Midwest. We're what we call Midwest nice, and we tend not to want to hurt people's feelings, plus we were raised that way. But there are ways of providing feedback, input, questions, concerns, even challenging ideas without hurting people's feelings. Mary said that you get people where there's a very strong reaction, defensiveness, that people have been, they've experienced that, and they've either consciously or unconsciously made up their minds they're going to tiptoe around it. They're not going to bring it up again. They're not going to have that experience, that encounter with the truth again. There still are ways. I'm not misleading you, we're leading up to it. There are ways of addressing it, but it all begins with you. It's not like, Tom, I want to highlight all these things. I want to take it home and show it to my husband, and let him see how much he's not, saying what he really should. What is the matter you aren't, I'm going to ask you this, what is the matter you aren't openly talking about on your team? Okay, so I'm just going to ask you to think about that. Think one of two matters that are important to you, potentially to others, and relevant to your team, but are hard to discuss. So just give it some thought. You're not going to speak them. Just give it some thought. One or two topics that are undiscussable, matters that are off limits, that we can't bring up. They're difficult to talk about, but they're relevant. Yeah. Does everyone have something in mind? I'm not going to ask you to name it. Not a thing. Everyone has something in mind. I see heads nodding. Okay, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that as an activity. Okay. I always teach discussing undiscussables can be difficult, but it can be productive and it can give you extensive benefits. Some of those payoffs you read or we talked about earlier, but they can't be discussed until they're named. They can't be discussed until we ask what's not being discussed. That sounds so counterintuitive, but that's what I teach organizations and leaders and teams to do. Ask what's not being discussed. Welcome others to name it. Okay, work with me here. A moment ago, I asked you to think of one or two matters that are important to you, potentially to others, relevant to your team, but hard to discuss. Would you raise your hand if you have something in mind? I'm not going to ask you to name it. Do you have something in mind? Okay. Mary Jo, I'm going to ask you. Why? No. It's a different. Why do you have something in mind?
Why do I have something in mind?
Right. But why is that thing in your mind right now?
Oh, because it's important.
It's easier than that. Why is it in your mind right now? Because somebody asked you. Because well, we're not strangers, but somebody just asked you and made it safe and invited you to think of something that's difficult to talk about. I could stop now. This is what it's about. Asking people to talk about what are we not talking about? What is difficult to talk about? That's why it comes down to this, and we're gonna wind up here and wind down a little bit. Undiscussables can't be discussed until they're named. We have to ask what is not being discussed. What are we not making room for? What are we going to silence about? What are we tiptoeing around, sidestepping? And if we are talking about, we're sugarcoating, we're minimizing, we're softening. Every organization has them, every team, every project, every set of leaders, and it comes down to, and Mary Jo, you just beautifully illustrated, we make it harder than it is. The reason you're holding a thought in your mind about something that's difficult to talk about is because somebody asked. It's that simple. It's that simple. Okay. We're going back to humility matters. Humility matters. Whose feedback don't you want? Among your peers, among your direct reports. What topics do you not want your employees to be able to discuss? Whose good ideas don't you want to hear? Hard to answer, isn't it? What questions are off limits to your team for bringing up? They know. You don't know. How are you going to find out? Anyone? So now we've established you have important ideas, questions, concerns you've not shared. You have a low estimate that you are being kept fully informed about what you need to know. There's a range of, to the degree you have shared useful, relevant information with those professional or personal who would benefit by knowing. So we've created this agreement that there's undiscussables. And we're going to talk about a way through it. I teach a principle, and it's on your screen. I don't think it's on your handout. The key to talking about what matters, talking about what's on people's minds, is to create an environment where it's safe for anyone to speak up. Anyone, any level, any reason, any time. And that sounds like a really tall order. Like, Tom, I can't really do that. I have a decision to make. I need to make a decision and move on. And I say, okay, whose input don't you want? Whose concerns are you willing to sacrifice? If your car was leaking, would you want to know? But this is a really tall order because it has a second half to it. It has a half that says they can speak openly and honestly, provide input, propose ideas, give feedback, raise questions, express concerns, including challenge decisions without adverse consequences. That is really hard. I actually teach, and we get there, but we're not going to take that time. That's not the focus of the day. We're moving on to some other really important things. But then I ask, can you at least lead in such a way? And treat people so it's safe to speak up. That anyone, any level, any reason, any time can speak openly and honestly. So I'm going to ask you, anybody, when you think of how hard this is, take sole responsibility for creating that environment. That's tough. That's massive. That's large. But can you do this? Can you treat people in such a way where it's safer to speak up? Most people say, yeah, I can do that. I can get better at that. We'll show you how. I also like to think about great ideas. We can't shortchange those. I order a lot from Amazon. Has anyone ever returned something on Amazon? Chucky, what was it like? Simple. How did it go?
Smooth. They basically send you everything, just send it back.
Yep. Yep. Very easy.
They almost do it for you.
It's a great consumer experience, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Well, this was mine. I wanted to return something, and I got this email back. Dear Tom Green, we're contacting you about your request, and there's the order. We're glad to refund your purchase, and we wondered if you would also like to keep the item rather than return it. If so, please enjoy your purchase. Compliments of Amazon.com. Now, I had a great experience. I mean, obviously, I'm telling you about it. But how do you think this happened? How do you think it came to this at Amazon? I think I heard it.
Cost of postage.
Cost of postage. What do you think are some other reasons Amazon did this? Your first name again? Maureen, thank you. So a delighted customer, a happy customer. Are there any other, you mentioned postage, think there's any other rationale or logic? Restocking it.
You gotta handle it and restamp it and do all kind of stuff with it in order to sell it again.
Right. And if
Cheaper to let it go.
used now?
it is, you have to sell it as used if it's a book.
You're going to share with other people your good experience.
I have. Yeah. Yeah. I do it all the time. But what do you think it was like the first time somebody said, excuse me, what if we refund their money and let them keep the merchandise? What do you think it was like the first time somebody uttered that ridiculous idea?
Are you kidding?
Are you kidding me? That's not our business model. We mail things, we take things back. But do you think it's a goodwill reason or an economic reason that Amazon did this for me? It's absolutely economic. But how'd you like to be the person who, for the first time, and I doubt it was management, I bet it was a worker on the floor who opens packages and who walks warehouses larger than multiple football fields to reshelve it. And then, as you said, resell it as used. And if most of the world's like,
We'll waive the fee.
you have everything that I give away in my Discussables group workshop. The practices for talking about what matters are: invite, welcome, and honor feedback. Address the ego with humility. Practice humble curiosity. Ask for feed forward. We'll learn that this afternoon. Listen to what matters. Embrace uncertainty. Dignify every person and situation. Present yourself fully. And I teach people how to assess. On the back is a summary of what we've talked about so far. Recognize every person or organization as undiscussable topics. Create a culture where it's safe to speak up openly and honestly. Welcome others to provide input, propose ideas, give feedback, ask questions, express concerns, and challenge decisions without adverse consequences. So that's one tool. There's a lot we know about how to draw people out. One of them is to ask questions. More? One of them is to ask questions. But I will tell you that asking questions or inquiry is not the same as what curiosity is. Asking questions, lawyers do it all the time. They can lead people to a certain answer. As parents, we do it all the time too. And we try to lead our children to certain answers. We teach humble curiosity, because curiosity, truly, we don't know what we're about to ask. And instead of just asking questions, we open ourselves to ask what we don't know. And so this is summarized by just think along with me. The easiest way to show respect for others is to invite their views. So that which we've talked about all morning about, which is so difficult, and a barrier that stands between us and those who report to us, those we serve, and those we report to, the easiest way to show respect is just ask. People will speak up more honestly, readily, and respectfully when humbly asked. Humility prompts us to suspend what we believe is right and allows room to consider what's in the best interest of others in the organization. It drives the exploration of ideas, suspends judging, it unlocks minds, biases, defensive positions, strips away our agendas, and opens up conversation to the fullest information, the greatest meaning, and the strongest relationships. On the back of this are the best questions for you to practice humble curiosity. I'm going to ask you to just read them, not aloud, and just notice what these questions do. Notice how they're constructed. What do they do? They ask for feedback. What else do they do?
Requires more than yes or no.
Yes, they're open-ended without just yes or no. If you were asking these questions, if you found yourself using these words, what posture would you be in? Humble. Humble, thank you. Because you don't know the answers. What's your reaction to the decision I've made? What's your response to the information I provided? If we move ahead with this plan, what might be the unintended outcomes? I don't know. I'm genuinely curious. What haven't I made room to discuss? What's the burning question I might be failing to see? What might be some other ways to approach this? I like this fourth from the bottom. I just made a statement, and I wonder if it's actually true. That's humble. Let's discuss it further. I've been carrying around this idea or opinion, and I wonder if it's actually true. Tell me what you think. What would make this a stronger idea, or plan, or strategy, or decision? I really encourage you to build these into your dialogue, your questions with your peers, your teams, those who report to you, and those who you report to. Because we talked about humility, and we talked about curiosity, and now we talked about humble curiosity. You cannot be curious and have the ego operating at the same time. It's impossible. A learning posture is a humble posture. If you want to be sure you're humble, go to a learning posture where you truly are just opening yourself to learn. They can't coexist, the ego and learning at the same time. If you use these questions, you will suspend your certainty and give rise to whatever other ideas, questions, concerns are in the room. This is a good place to stop. Let's have lunch.